Everybody, Russ and the West Ham Network. Hope you're safe and wherever you indeed give it. Like, oh, all that stuff we say all the bloody time. So today, around lunchtime, Sky Sports released an exclusive interview with David Moyes. I say exclusive; it's an official interview with David Moyes. Any of you who keep an eye on, say, Wolves, for example, where their manager Julian Lopetegui did an unofficial interview with Guilherme, and it hasn't gone down too well. Let's say that amongst the Wolves fan base, in terms of what he says, not necessarily what he's saying, but the fact is how he's saying it, and the fact was it was not okay by the club, and then they're selling all their players. They can't afford to even buy Aaron Cresswell and all that type of stuff. So, you know, it's not all doom and gloom. That's what I'm saying at the moment. I mean, we fucking won a European trophy, in like a month ago, and now it seems like the world's crashing down. And I've got that meme, the meme of the cartoon dog with like all the fire around him, and he's like, "It's okay, everything's okay." That's how I feel at the moment. Anyway, so he was asked a number of questions about Divine and Barmer, which we'll talk about in a minute. He was asked about pre-season, about the lack of activity, and he was asked about the new regime. Because obviously this year, as of the last 26 days, he's had sort of a new boss in terms of Tim Steinen, the technical director. And obviously we've read all about this transfer committee. In fact, we had our own transfer committee yesterday. We had myself, Nick it was Gary from Claret and Booze. We had Dan from West Ham Fan TV and Mike from Babbling Irons as our own four-man West Ham fan committee in terms of transfers. And we managed to agree on a couple of players. We actually did. It wasn't totally. We didn't agree on every player, but we agreed on some players. So check that out. It was quite funny last night. But asked about the new regime, because obviously that's important. Moyes said this. He said it's new. It's new to the club in terms of having a technical director. I've known Mark for a long time and I have a great relationship with him, and I'm still getting to know Tim. Because of the shortness of the summer and being in Australia, the amount of time we've had together has been limited. But I'm sure we'll get down to work and do what we have to do. The club have made several offers for players. We're in the market. We are quite active. Hopefully, some of them will come off in the future. So that's too positive there, Dave. But I mean, we know that he doesn't like going to pre-season camps, sort of, long distance. And we know that Noble and Tim were still in the UK when he was in Australia. And it's the Carlos Borges deal apparently was led more by, well, in terms of what we've heard, whether it's true or not, was led more by Tim and Noble, while Moyes was still in Australia. Not behind his back, but it was led by them in terms of getting that. So, although it's been a week since that was announced by the fee was apparently agreed by Fabrizio Romano in terms of leaked last Thursday, and we still haven't anything. By the sounds of it, it's the buyback issue is the main sticking point. Everything else seems to have been agreed. So I'm sure that will come to some sort of resolution soon. What's really interesting about this is, and the slight thing that worries me a little bit is when he says, "I'm sure we'll get down to work and do what we have to do." Shouldn't that be the case now? Shouldn't we already be, you're back now? You've been back from Australia for, almost a week now. Shouldn't you be down to work now? Should this, do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, get ticking. We ain't got long until the season starts. So a little bit sort of strange in terms of his terminology. Also, I think it's a bit strange because the club have made several offers. And we are out in the market, so we're in the market. Why not we have made several? I mean, I'm just being pedantic, and maybe it's the vernacular he's using, but it just seems you've made a few rather than the club. You're not part of the club, but you're in the market. I don't know. Again, I'm just reading too into it. I'm just splitting hairs, as people would say. Asked about sort of general building on last year. Obviously trophy success. He says, I'm going to try and build on it and push forward, and we've got to enjoy it. It's the first time we've won a trophy in 40 years at West Ham. And we need to enjoy it as well, because Christ knows when the next time comes along. There aren't many clubs in the country that can go to win European trophies. So we're certainly going to continue talking about it and thinking about it. But meanwhile, we'll also be moving on and getting ready for the new season. We have to use it as the fuel to drive us forward, to improve. We've had a good run at the last 3 years, and I don't know many teams in Europe who have how many teams have finished in Europe 3 times in a row. he then goes and say, I can, of course, there's a few. I can name a few, obviously, but for West Ham to do it is a great achievement, and we'll try and do it again this year. If you look at it, there have been very few defeats in Europe in the last 2 years, and I'm hoping that turns out to be the case in the third year as well. Indeed, this is the first time in our history we have appeared in European football for 3 years in a row, which is no mean feat. Granted, it's yes, last year we was in a third tier, but still, technically, we're in Europe 3 years in a row. Ironically, last year, didn't we win more games in Europa Conference League than we did in the Premier League or something ridiculous like that? We obviously go into the group stages directly in terms of this year's Europa League. The draw, I think, is the 1st of September, and we're top seeds for that. I think it's going to be interesting to see again how, in terms of priorities, I think for the last 2 years, I think, well, maybe not last year, because last year we were shit the first, but we still did all right in Europe, but we were playing, lesser teams, let's be honest, than the season before. But still, it seemed that it was the Premier League took a back seat to Europa League. I think last year it couldn't, because we needed to stay up more than anything, or to get enough points to guarantee staying up. But we had a bigger squad, so we were able to almost run two teams, which was great for something. But I just think for continuity, I remember we interviewed Don Hutchinson last season, and he was saying like someone like Skarmaka, he'd score in the conference and score a couple of goals, and then wouldn't start in the Premier League. And actually, as a striker, you want to keep going, you want to keep playing. You don't want to be one game in, one game out. You want to be the main man. And I think where the season before that we got knackered towards the end because we had a smaller squad, there was that continuity that came along, and it was almost like, okay, you've had a shit game this week, but you've got the European game coming at the week on Thursday, and then we'll kick on the Sunday. I don't particularly like the two teams separately. It's important to have that. I understand that in terms of rotation, but I don't think you get any fluidity, particularly in the first half of the season, which last year we had no fluidity. We were chopping and changing all the time, particularly not just from the European to Premier League, but in terms of the back four and the midfield, because people were getting up to speed, were getting niggles because they hadn't had a proper pre-season and things like that. But he's looking to build. He's looking to build on that success from last year. And as I said, the first time in our history we've done Europe 3 years in a row. I mean, obviously the likes of City, they're always in there. Man United, always in there, regardless of what competition. Chelsea, obviously not there this year. Spurs are in the in Europa League. Obviously, you've got Villa in the conference. Brighton in the Europa League as well. Spurs in the Europa League? I just completely forgot. Sorry. Premier League last year. I completely forgot. 2023 table. There we go. I've just had like glazed over. Spurs aren't in Europe at all. Sorry, Spurs aren't in Europe at all. Sorry, my bad. They're not in Europe at all. What a shame. And I'd put them in the Europa League. They're out completely. Newcastle, obviously. Yes, I got Newcastle. Yeah, sorry. Ignore me. So we'll see how that affects the likes of Spurs, the likes of Chelsea without any European football. It's going to be quite interesting, I think. I think it's going to be quite interesting next season in terms of the Premier League. And that should be our main bread and butter. We did our show this afternoon, where we were talking about, people coming in and transfers. And we spoke about the youth team. And, for me, the likes of, Freddie Potts and stuff like that, giving them the cup competitions and the early group stages of the European competitions is fantastic sort of experience for them. Particularly someone like Freddie Potts. I mean, you look at the moment, if everyone stays and if we buy one or two extra midfielders, he's probably about 4 or 5 midfielders ahead of him, realistically. So you can see why, they've put apparently the whole under 21 squad are up for up on loan, apart from Mbama. We'll talk about Mbama in a minute. So you can understand why. Asking about sort of the team activity, it's almost like he's getting his excuses a little bit in, I'll be honest. He said that, because of the lateness of the final and the international games, we've only just getting back together now. We've only had the 2 days as a full group. apart from that, we've not had much time together. And indeed, obviously, last week we had the Dagenham Redbridge game. We got Stad Gen later on this weekend. I believe it's on the club website on YouTube channel. I think they're streaming it, and obviously a number of the Australian tour first teamers were not involved at the Dagenham Redbridge game. The likes of Skamaka went back to Italy for check up his knee. Fornals was in Spain, and so they were given a couple of days off to spend with their families. But now it seems the work's really begun. So what's going to be interesting, I think, to see is this Stad Ren and also the Bayer Leverkusen matches to see if we're still persisting with this two up front. I don't think we will be. I think it was more of a function of who was available and the fact that all the international players weren't around. But yeah, we don't know. We just don't know what's going on, really. And, in terms of the season ahead, he says, to win a European competition, you need a good squad and good players. Of course, we need to add to it and to improve. And that's what we're attempting to do. But we saw Paqueta get better and grow as the season went on, like we did with quite a few players who we brought in last year. We didn't have a great start with them, but their performances grew. Ultimately, we brought them in to get a big squad to compete in the Premier League and compete in Europe. It worked out correctly in the end because we won a big trophy with the players we brought in to do that. I think consistency is a good word for what's needed now to get them to be more consistent as the season goes on. But I thought that towards the end, we started to see that. And we did start to see that towards the end. But the trouble was, it was maybe a little bit too late for the Premier League games. Obviously, Europe's different. One-off games, two-off games. I think consistency is key, but I think it's not just consistency, it's getting out the gates early. And, we've got a rough first half dozen fixtures. Obviously, you have to play everyone in the Premier League twice. But we are, for the last season, for example, very poor out the gates, and, people's... it was just one of those things where you're playing a lot of top teams and the performances weren't there. And as you said, the players weren't there. They hadn't adjusted. And that's the trouble when you go and buy players who maybe, and this is the whole argument about Premier League ready players, and people go, oh no, he's spending too much money. The reason why, is they already know the Premier League. And so, yes, if James Ward-Prowse comes in, if he comes in, and he comes in with a week to go before the Premier League starts, does that concern me? Not really, because he'll have had a pre-season with Southampton. He knows the Premier League, he knows the opposition he's playing, and a few training sessions would be able to give him some sort of idea of how things work. And as the games come, bring game after game, you learn how everyone works in the game situation. And he's an intelligent player, intelligent person, so that wouldn't really concern me. What would concern me is if you bought someone like Youssef Fofana, or like we did with Gianluca Scamacca, and you bought them far too late before the season started. They have to adjust to living in London. They have to adjust to the Premier League. They have to adjust to the teammates. There's a lot to take on board. So that's why I think you definitely need a balance in terms of who you bring in. I don't think you can bring in a team totally of unknown quantities, because that could bite you in the bum. It might not. It might, I go back to Vladimir Sufal, who was bought on a Friday, and we played him on the Saturday or Sunday against Leicester away, and he looked like he'd been there all his life, playing for West Ham. And that happens occasionally, but for most players, they do need a little bit of adjustment, but not so much, I think, as last year. We had so many new players in, and obviously the injury to Aged probably meant that we brought Tilo Kehrer in. Maybe we might not have brought him in if Aged hadn't got injured. I don't know. And then he was asked finally about Divine Mbama, who we spoke about Hammer's headlines today with Aaron Cresswell mentioned about him in an interview with The Athletic. Asked about Mbama, he says, I think he could really make it, yeah. He's a young centre forward and it's a very hard role to play. Being a young player for many reasons, but we like him a lot. We hope that he can continue to develop. We'll get him as minutes and get him playing as often as we can. At the minute, he's doing as well as anybody, so why not? But again, this is the time of the season where it's a bit easier. The pressure isn't on. The games have got no meaning to them in pre-season except for getting yourself ready and fit. And that's fair enough. It's true. It's just pre-season. We go back and look at, Avram Grant had 100% pre-season, record with West Ham. And look what happened there, sometimes we've had a complete shit pre-season and we've had a great season. It doesn't really matter. It's about getting the reps. It's about getting the minutes in your feet and your legs, as the old adage always says. But there's no doubt Mbama's going to be playing a massive part. We know that. We know he's the only one who's not going to be available for loan for the under-21s. And that, to me, shows that he's going to feature. We've seen him in the away kit setup, in terms of the marketing. So we know he's going to be front and center for them as well. So I really think this could be his breakout year. I look back and look at people like, as I said, I think Hammer's headlines, look at Ferguson from Brighton. He made an impression and just kept on going. And I think Mbama could do that. He really, really could do that. And I think they're roughly the same age. Physically, I think Mbama's ready. He'll obviously improve. He's very raw at the moment, but I think we know we've got a hell of a player on our hands. He's a player who excites us, and as West Ham fans. And so, we've had there was Billy McKinley, who he said in a recent interview, I think it might be on the West Ham official website. He's knocking on the door. He's asking us questions, and that type of thing in terms of team selection going into the beginning of the season. If Antonio goes, and we don't replace him with another forward, which, in all honesty, we haven't really been linked to it apart from Brozier. Everyone else seems to be just like real strange links. We haven't really, I suppose, Habib Diallo we've been linked to. We've been linked with Jonathan David, but none of them seem to be that concrete. So if Antonio does go, for example, I think we'll have. I would like to get replacement, but actually, Mbama can step up. Skamaka, I hope to still be there. You've still got Ings, and we know Moyes fancies Cornet as a centre forward. So it's probably not the ideal situation, but it's not not all lost hope if Antonio goes and he's not replaced. I think at the moment there's other positions we need to replace. And we need to get reinforcements. The midfield, particularly, to replace he should not be named the former captain. I think that left wing needs pace, and I think Borges will bring that as well. I think we still need a centre half. Maybe not a first teamer, but I think we need a good reserve first half, a centre half rather. Someone like Harwood Bellis, for example, I think would do a great job for us. And then, maybe the fullbacks as well, or maybe the right back. We were linked. Apparently, we put a bid in for Emil Holm from Spieza for about 8 million. They want about 12 million quid. Brighton are also interested in him as well. So maybe. But anyway, hopefully that's you found it interesting. Just sort of dissecting the interview in a bit more detail. I'm sure there'll be more clips popping up on social media. But it was a relatively decently length interview. Some interesting things. He hasn't really had a lot of time with Steindon. They hope to work better together or get to working together, that type of thing. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, let me know in the comments below. As I said, if you're new around here, give it a like, give it a subscribe, all that good stuff. You know what to do. Any breaking news will bring it to you. And then go back and watch our this morning. Anton did a bit about Skamaka and his thoughts about him moving on or not moving on. And we did Rusty Rumour Roundup on Thursday live. And then we did Hammer's headlines this afternoon, talking about Thomas Souček maybe and the role that Galatasaray could have in our transfer plans this summer. So take care, stay safe, stay warm, stay humble. Much love. Bye-bye.